Hi everyone. I'm going to be introducing you to someone very special today, part of our growing Conservative team on Parliament Hill. Ellis Ross was born in Kitimat, British Columbia, right on the Pacific coast. He grew up in an Indigenous community, was very successful, became the chief councillor of the Haisla First Nation, then he was elected to the provincial legislature, became Minister of Gas and Development, and more recently, he helped negotiate one of the single biggest energy deals in Canadian history, the LNG Canada plant, $40 billion. I think it's the single biggest infrastructure project the country has ever known. And to the great benefit of the Haisla people, but to all Canadians. It will soon come online and much anticipated. But after achieving all that, I went out and recruited him to become a candidate for the Conservative Party, and he won. For the first time since the Skeena-Bulkley Valley seat has been reconstituted, he has won it for the Conservatives. We defeated the NDP in that riding, and now he is serving as the Shadow Minister for the Environment, where he will be working with our team to get big projects pushed through, projects that will defeat poverty, provide cheap, affordable, reliable energy, not only to Canadians but to the world, and massive paychecks for our people. But I want you to get to know this incredible person so you understand the team that we're putting together, not only to hold this government to account, but to prepare as a government in waiting. Ellis, thanks for making some time for me. Before we get started on the politics of today, I think people would enjoy getting to know a little bit about you. You have an incredible family history. You're part of the Haisla Nation. Why don't you tell us, who are the Haisla, for people who don't know?
The Haisla are Koguth people. That's our dialect, and we originate from a small community further south from us, Uikino, Rivers Inlet. Mm-hmm. We're actually associated with, language-wise, with Lisla, which is Bella Bella as well as people in Vancouver. But we're really relatively newcomers to the area. If you're talking about newcomers, going back further back than 10,000 years.
10,000 years?
Yeah, and so we came up and we actually settled in what is now known as Kitimat Village.
Yes. And
then we invited a lot of other First Nations to come join us.
When did the Haisla settle in Kitimat?
Well,
ballpark.
I've been told different times, but I think the safest guess is more than 10,000 years ago.
10,000 years ago?
Mainly
in that particular location?
In that particular location, mainly because there was hooligans there, as kind of a smelt, a fish. And at that time, it was all rocks. There's no trees. At a time when the channel itself, a saltwater channel, used to freeze over. So I heard all the stories about what it was like when our people first settled there.
And where would they have been before that, or is that too far back to know?
They were originally from Rivers Inlet.
Okay.
Awikino is the traditional name. So we're a branch of the Awikino people. But we've actually become a melting pot of all different First Nations from the surrounding areas, mm-hmm. including the Tsimshian, Tlingit people from up in Alaska, and all across British Columbia.
And you were born, if you don't mind my asking, what year would you have been born?
1965.
65, okay. And what was it like to grow up in the 60s in Kitimat?
It was great because I grew up on reserve, and like many reserves, there's a sense of freedom there. You grew up fishing, hunting, hiking. You're really taught about your cultural values and your customs. And it wasn't until I was a little bit older as a young child to realize there's a bigger world outside my reserve, meaning Kitimat, which is 7 miles down the road, which is a non-native community.
And so you went to Kitimat, and did you live there throughout your entire childhood?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. I moved away as a young man. My wife basically wanted to go get an education, so I moved to Prince George for a while.
Yeah.
Because there was no housing on reserve or no jobs, I actually stayed away from our community for the better part of 15 years. And that's really how I shaped my political views, because I really struggled as a young man trying to find a job. And so I figured I didn't want anybody to go through what I went through.
So did that motivate you to become someone who fights for employment and job opportunities?
Not until I figured out what it meant to be an elected councillor.
Okay.
Because initially when I got in, I was a coach of a basketball team, and I thought I could take my council's vast resources and fund my basketball teams, only to find out my council had no money. There was so much debt. they couldn't even think about funding anything else outside of their debt and their program. So it was kind of awakening to me to figure out not only what my own band was going through, but what many bands go through all across Canada.
So you had to dig the band out of that debt?
Yeah, I was a counselor at the time. It was my chief and counsel at the time. That was their priority, digging out of debt, as well as trying to chart out a new future.
And how did you do that?
Well, we had a chief counselor that was economic development oriented, but also had an idea that we should utilize the Haida court case of 2004, meaning the Crown's duty to consult and accommodate First Nations on their rights and title. And so we developed that over the years and developed a relationship with the federal government, provincial government, at a time when nobody understood what that meant.
And when did you become the chief counselor?
2011.
Okay.
And then got acclaimed in 2013.
Because that was the exact time that that consortium was putting together the LNG Canada plan.
That's right.
And this is really like an absolutely monstrous economic project. It included the Coastal GasLink pipeline from Alberta all the way to Kitimat, and then this enormous liquefaction plant, which I think we visited together
That's
about
right, we did.
2 years ago or so, that liquefies and then will eventually ship off gas to Asia and allow us to arbitrage the difference between the North American price for gas, which I think is it's around $3 per million metric British thermal units in Canada, but I think it's something like $12 in Asia. So basically, it's 4 times higher in Asia than it is here. You could buy something for $3 and sell it for $12, and do that billions of times. You make a lot of money pretty quick, don't you?
Well, who's got the better deal in that equation, right? It's not us. But that was one of the motivating factors behind us. Not just to lift our people out of poverty, which we accomplished, but also looking at the global issues around emissions for Asia, Africa, Europe, United States. And that was always our belief that not only are we doing this for the region, we're doing it for the globe.
Right. Well, the Fraser Institute was out with a report just the other day showing that if Canada were to double its natural gas production and send all of the excess to China and India, by displacing dirtier coal, it would actually reduce emissions by about 89% of the total emissions of all of Canada.
Yes.
And something like 600 million tons of emissions would be avoided by displacing dirty coal with clean Canadian gas. LNG Canada is the starting point for that. You've got another project, I think it's called Cedar.
Cedar, that was an agreement that we negotiated with LNG Canada to utilize capacity on their existing pipeline, the Coastal GasLink,
Okay.
so we could build our own.
So you're going to have yet another liquefaction plant for
Yes,
that.
a floating, but it'll be under the pipeline capacity.
So it
that's
will
already
actually
approved.
float. It'll float on the.
It'll be floating.
Where will that be? Is it in Kitimat as well?
In Kitimat, at the head of Douglas Channel, just below LNG Canada.
Okay.
And it was land that we acquired almost like 9 years ago. We purchased it, and we kept it in fee simple status because we thought business likes certainty. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel with environmental laws or taxation laws. Let's just utilize what's in place for Canada and BC already. Industry loved that. They came in. Yes, we love that idea.
Amazing. And so this floating contraption will receive the gas, compress and cool it, turn it into a liquid. A big tanker will come along. That tanker will be injected with the gas. It'll be filled up and then shipped off to Asia.
Exactly.
Okay. And what is this, like you grew up in Kitimat. It must be a hell of a lot different now than when you were a kid.
Oh, night and day. Night and day, especially as an elected leader. Because early on in my elected career as a councillor, I realized, number one, we had no money. Number two, we were restricted by the Indian Act. And I was raised by 2 parents that went to residential school. They were sent by their parents. But I was always taught to be independent, not to ask for any help. So when I realized part of my job was to go to Ottawa to ask for money, I refused. But I did need something to get our people employed, get them out of poverty, and to get our council closer to being an independent government working model. And everything I saw up to date had failed. And so I was trying to think, what do I do next? So economic development in a roundabout way came to be the answer. And it's succeeded in so many different ways that I never imagined. I mean, the people determining their own future, the council determining their own future, and the Indian Act becoming less and less relevant. It's just beyond my wildest dreams.
And can we replicate it in other
can.
places? Yeah. How do we do that?
Well, when I go to talk to First Nations, I talk to them and tell them, you got to know what you want. You have to know what you want. And ultimately, if you do want independence, you do want a future for your kids and your grandkids, you're going to have to embrace change. And change is not easy. And for that, you're going to have to elect the leadership or select your leadership that can reflect what you really want. It's not easy. It wasn't easy for us. I mean, we started in 2004 with this idea. And it was very painful to get to the point where we are today, and nobody really remembers those days. But it was worth it to see the younger generation not knowing or caring about the Indian Act.
Right.
Not knowing what it's like to be on welfare, like I know how, or what it's like to collect unemployment insurance annually, like I know how. It's a completely different world. And I've always said that if my kids and my grandkids don't know anything about the Indian Act or don't know anything about poverty or welfare, then my generation did their job well.
Right.
They should be addressing different issues in their lifetime.
So you're basically breaking the control and bureaucracy that held the community down. The control from Ottawa, I mean to say.
Yes.
That held the community down for so long. Now you're breaking that and replacing it with an independence that comes from resource development, jobs, opportunity.
Without a doubt. And it branches out from there. I'm talking to so many different leaders now. And Billy Moran,
Yes.
your other MP,
Yeah.
they've advanced so far. They've gone beyond what we've done.
They're on Enoch. I mean, he was the chief there. He inherited a huge debt and a high unemployment rate, and he balanced the budget. I think he paid down a bunch of the debt, and he got the unemployment down to almost nothing.
Yeah.
So those are the stories we want to replicate. He's serving now as a Conservative member of Parliament near Edmonton and our shadow minister for Indigenous issues. And that's our agenda, is to unlock real economic opportunity. My view is that First Nations people can be the richest in the entire world. Because the resources we have are literally boundless. I mean, we can't even begin to produce them all. Even if we were operating on full throttle with the government out of the way and the perfect policies and the best business, we have so many resources we could never produce them all. We would never run out. And First Nations people can be among the biggest beneficiaries, if not the biggest. And so we can replicate the story you had over and over and over again.
And it's probably the best form of reconciliation I've ever seen, especially when people use terms like economic reconciliation. When you're not only you're closing the gap in terms of standard of living between First Nations and non-First Nations, but if you come to Kitimat, you'll see everybody succeeded. Non-First Nations and First Nations alike, even First Nations from different territories, came in and took part. There was enough to go around. And so it uplifted everybody. And I always thought that reconciliation, that is a definition of reconciliation where there's no winners and losers. Everybody benefits, including the province, including the country.
And that's what you're seeing right now in your community.
Without a doubt.
So what are the changes that need to happen at the federal level for this to happen again and again?
Well, get some of those bureaucratic rules out of the way, all those policies that restrict development. I mean, talk to First Nations that have this vision, not only the vision to get their own people out of poverty, but also have a vision for building the country. I mean, I think the one thing that I've seen in the last year that I've never seen before, the country realized they have to come together given what happened down in the United States with Mr. President Trump. And I've never seen that before. And I think it's about time that Canada really thought about their place in the geoeconomics of the world. I mean, you can't help but think what Russia's doing, what China's doing, what the United States is doing. Where do we fit in? And that's mainly why I want to join the Conservative Party. I want to see this country rebuilt the way the people envisioned it 100 years ago, 200 years ago, complete with freedoms, economic freedoms, independence. We need a place in the world. We can't just be playing second fiddle to the United States. We need them, of course, but we need a more diverse economy if we want to survive.
And the Pacific Coast is a big part of that. It's a major exit point, maybe the biggest exit point for goods and services that we want to ship overseas to non-U.S. markets. So you have a very interesting geography. We've talked about Kitimat, but there's also Rupert, which is Rupert's got to be one of our bigger ports by volume, I would think.
It's one of the best kept secrets nationwide.
Okay, is it? I heard it's ranked as high as fourth.
Yeah.
For volume, after Vancouver, Montreal, Halifax. I think that Rupert comes, but if I'm wrong, someone in the comments can correct me, but it's definitely up there as one of our very important ports. I had a chance to visit it, and I was very impressed with the workforce they have there. There's a lot that could happen in Rupert if we expand that port. Tell me about your vision for Rupert.
Well, their expansion is taking place right now.
Yeah.
And it's massive what they're doing. But they're coming in under the same hurdles that First Nations have. That some of the bureaucratic rules there just don't really fit the growth or the potential that,
right.
that Canada has. And the First Nations have bought into that, not only in terms of the economic considerations, but also the land acquisitions. They're part of that equation.
Right.
But I also can't forget Stewart. Stewart is doing massive amounts of business for the mining industry, but they're also doing import-export for Alaska. And they're incorporating...
Tell the listeners what Stewart is.
Stewart is a smaller private port up in northern BC above Prince Rupert. They haven't really gotten much attention lately, but the investment that's been increasing over the years, I was shocked at what they're doing. They've got so much potential, and they're doing business with Alaska, doing business with Alberta. They're actually doing business with Vietnam.
Wow.
And what I saw, I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. Especially when you think that Stewart across the channel, that's Alaska. That's United States. Mm-hmm. And I see so much potential for them to cooperate in terms of what's happening, regardless of what Trump's doing. But they've got so much tourism potential. They've got export-import potential. And I don't think anybody realizes that with the backlog, with all the ports on the West Coast, Stewart can take up a portion of that. Not as much as Rupert, mind you, or Nanaimo for that matter, but they are a crucial part, especially of the mineral industry that we're talking about unleashing.
We need a lot more competition and efficiency in our ports right now.
Yes.
There's a lot of gatekeeping, internal protectionism, blocking, and very incompetent management. We could be doing a lot more volume out of those West Coast, all of those West Coast ports, if we could get the federal bureaucracy out of the way and allow expansions to go ahead. There's a lot of, like for example, the impact assessment law, C-69, that's another layer of bureaucracy that you don't need for ports. There's these things could be done with very little federal involvement, and they can be self-funding. You don't need big fat checks from Ottawa because the port activity generates its own income to pay for it. And we could have massive employment at the port sites, but also for all of the supplier communities that are shipping the minerals, the gas, the manufactured goods and other things, if we could get our ports open for business. Have you thought a lot about how to get these ports firing on all cylinders?
They've got the plan well in hand, but I do think that some of the interior communities could use a helping hand. Terrace in particular has got an inland port.
Right.
And they could be handling the logistics. They're actually the hub of everything that's happening up in that region. And they're doing a lot of work already. They're doing a lot of work with LNG Canada. I think we should be opening up that to Stewart, to Prince Rupert. But like I said, Rupert I think is Canada's best kept secret. It can't be secret. Mm-hmm. You really want to compete with the United States or you want to diversify your economy, you have to think about ports like Prince Rupert, Stewart, Kitimat, and you have to support them. And
will you be pushing those ports as a member of Parliament?
Without a doubt.
Okay.
It's part of a bigger economic plan. That's what I liked about the Conservative economic plan. is that we've got so much potential, but we're not making use of it. I think we should be connecting all of them, and we should be utilizing every square inch of our opportunity.
You mentioned economic freedom. Is that a principle that's important to you?
Without a doubt, because I've seen the opposite.
Yeah.
Under the Indian Act, First Nations had no rights. They had no economic base. They had nothing. Those days are long gone. That's an imaginary hurdle now, the Indian Act. But seeing that economic freedom, I mean, I think a lot of First Nations are realizing it too on reserve. Like you see what's happening in Kitsilano and Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
That's a high-rise building that's built on reserve.
You're talking about the Squamish.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's incredible.
On reserve.
It's incredible. Yeah. For those who don't know, Ellis is talking about a housing development that the Squamish are building on 10 acres. Not a lot. It's not a big footprint.
But reserve
But
land.
it's reserve land. They're building 6,000 units on 10 acres of land. So let's just get this straight. That's 600 units per acre in the city of Vancouver, which is known for being one of the hardest places to get a building permit. The city and the governmental costs amount to $1.3 million per unit of housing on Vancouver controlled area. But on the urban reserve controlled by the much more entrepreneurial Squamish people, you're getting 600 units per acre,
Yes.
or 6,000 for 10 acres. And this is the kind of thing we need if we're going to end the housing crisis. Get these municipal and other governmental gatekeepers out of the way, build quickly, fast permits, low development charges, lots of housing. You flood the economy with more supply. That means more paychecks for the carpenters, electricians, welders, and plumbers, but it also means more affordable homes for young people. Can the model that Squamish are doing in their Vancouver Reserve be replicated in other parts of the country?
So this is an interesting issue that's coming up for me because I'm getting more and more people questioning me, how do they create urban reserves? And what's different for me is it's not First Nations that are asking this, it's non-First Nations, because there's less red tape with reserve land than there is with non-reserve land.
You know, it's funny, I was in Montreal, I was speaking to a very big investor, and he said he wanted to build a big project in Calgary.
Yeah.
Too much hassle to deal with City Hall. So he went to Susina.
Yeah.
And Susina approved it.
Yeah.
And now I don't know how many millions, but it's a monster project.
Yeah.
Susina residents getting the benefit. Calgary, where I come from, did not because there's too much red tape at City Hall.
So I had a similar one from Alberta, data centers.
Okay.
They take up tremendous amount of electricity. I understand that. They take up a tremendous amount of space, but they wanted to locate in BC. But they specifically asked to go on reserve. And exactly for that reason.
Fascinating.
Less red tape. But of course we have an electricity supply problem and infrastructure problem in BC. So we can't do too much electricity until that's addressed. But still.
Look, natural gas is a big part of the solution. Gas is still extremely cheap in North America. And you can power the data centers with gas-fired electrical generators. You know, $3 for the gas.
Yeah.
And we have that abundance of power that could fire up these data centers. They're real energy-consuming beasts, like you say. Somebody was telling me that when you do a ChatGPT inquiry, it takes 9 times as much electricity as when you do a Google search. So just one example of how much energy these data centers burn through in order to do their work. Well, we have an immense amount of energy that could power these things to the point where I think the Americans, when we get through all this trade insanity, are going to end up having to set up their data centers in Canada. Google, Facebook, Amazon, they're all talking about buying their own nuclear reactors to power their data centers. That's how much energy they need. So a nuclear power station just for them. And we can say, listen, you don't need to spend those billions or take those risks. We have the energy in Canada.
Yeah.
We're a secure place to store your data. We're right next door. Cold climate means that it's not as expensive to cool down the data centers, which generate a tremendous amount of heat for malfunction. So we have that advantage, but we've got to unlock our energy abundance to do it.
So I've been questioned on this as well in terms of using natural gas to turn turn it into electricity. But I also point out that BC had limitations on phase 2 of LNG Canada.
Right.
They wanted to electrify it.
So for those that are listening, you've got phase 1 is almost done. Several months they'll start shipping gas, but there's a phase 2 which will massively increase it. But, sorry, go on.
Yeah, and phase 2, BC wanted them to electrify the turbines. Well, they just lifted those conditions and said, you don't have to be net zero by 2030. You have to be net zero ready by 2030, knowing that we have a deficiency in electricity supply and infrastructure in BC. And that's what nobody's talking about. Energy is the foundation not only of our future in terms of economics, but our quality of life.
Right.
Right? And just be honest about our electricity demand here, because this year everybody's predicting that we're going to have to buy more electricity in the United States.
That's crazy.
Upwards of 20%.
That is crazy. Sending more money to the Americans for something we can produce cheaper at home if we get out of our own way.
Yes.
Yeah, energy is the solution to poverty. You need energy. Massive, cheap, affordable, reliable energy. Energy, it heats, it cools our people, it moves our people and our products. And if we don't have cheap energy, we're always going to have people living in poverty. Well, we have the potential to be the most energy abundant country not just in the world, but in the history of the world. And that's what we need to unlock.
And when you look at the countries like China and India, who want the same standard of living that we do,
right?
I mean, is there any wonder why they're building so many coal plants?
Right, exactly.
I mean, they can't get access to Canadian LNG. And by the way, there is a business case for LNG in Canada.
Oh,
there is.
Huge. Trudeau said there was no business case. Like I said earlier, not to repeat myself, but when it's $3 here and it's $12 there, I mean, anytime you can sell something for $12 that you bought for $3 and do that billions of times, you're going to get very, very rich. And it's great for the environment. It breaks their dependence on coal. And the demand is going to be so massive from the Chinese and the Indians. And they're banging down our door. The Europeans want our gas so they can break their dependence on Putin. And we just have to get the gas in a ship and overseas.
Well, Niska LNG, Sai LNG, that you're aware of, they just signed an agreement with France.
I saw that.
And that raises different questions for me. Like, is that the Panama Canal? Or is that the Arctic route that might open up?
Interesting.
So
what do you think it will be? What will be the route?
I kind of think it has to be Panama Canal, because I don't think it's really truly certain on when and how long the Arctic route will open up. By the way, Russia and China have got eyes on our Arctic route.
That's why we need to take back control of our north, get our icebreakers. I propose 4 new icebreakers, big ones. Plus, we obviously need to go ahead with fighter jets, Poseidons, a new Arctic base in Iqaluit, and other military infrastructure to do our part and protect the north against the Russians and Chinese, who, for obvious reasons, are going to want those shipping lanes and those minerals. We have so much potential in this country. We have the single biggest oceanic coastline, 3rd biggest supply of uranium, first biggest supply of uranium, I think, in the world. The biggest supply of potash. We have more fresh water. The 3rd biggest supply of oil. We're the 5th biggest producer of natural gas. 5th biggest supply of lithium.
5th biggest producer of natural gas
in the world, but we don't ship any of it overseas.
It goes to the United States.
Here in the United States. It's unbelievable.
5th biggest.
If you had gotten Asian prices for all the gas that we shipped to the United States in 2023, we would have got $26 billion more money. But instead, we got American prices. So we're basically gifting the Americans $26 billion a year in discounted gas that they, by the way, can liquefy and ship overseas for 4 times the price. That's how stupid our government is when it comes to this policy. But we're going to fix that. That's why we're in this. I mean, this is the guy to do it. He's already done it. He did LNG Canada, biggest project ever. He's working on doubling that project, expanding at Rupert, bringing new projects at Stewart, and of course now he's our nationwide environment shadow minister. So he will be pushing for an end to C-69, the no development law, C-48, the West Coast shipping ban, is the energy cap, the industrial carbon tax. We want to create shovel-ready zones so that we can pre-approve major economic projects before anyone even applies for them, so investors can pour the money in, hire the workers, and get started right away. More six-figure jobs for welders, electricians, pipe fitters, other key trades. And of course, our First Nations will be overcoming and just defeating all poverty with these projects. So that's the vision, and we have someone here who has the hands-on experience to make it happen, part of my shadow cabinet, and a newly elected member of Parliament serving all Canadians. So congratulations to you.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
You're going to do a great job, and we're very excited, not just for Northwest BC and your home community, but for all of Canada. And pretty incredible to say that you are representing a place where you have a 10,000-year family history.
At least, yeah.
I don't know how many other members of Parliament would ever have been able to say that.
Yeah.
Good. Well, a lot to be proud of. Thanks a lot.
I appreciate your leadership. Thank you very much.
Excellent.